Hello, welcome guests, speakers, and sponsors. My name is Atia Thurman. I'm the Associate Director of the Clark Fox Policy Institute, where we work to address systemic inequity so that all children and the people who care for them have the opportunity to thrive. I would like to give a special acknowledgement to the Institute's Director, Gary Parker, for his leadership as executive producer of this series, COVID-19 and Race. We are in part number 9 of a 10-part series, but it didn't start off that way, so we're happy with the evolution this has taken over time. I want to give a special thank you to Janet Gillow, Director of Brown School Professional Development Programs and the lead of Open Classroom. I want to say thank you to Maxine Clark and Bob Fox, whose vision for a just and equitable society is backed by their unflinching commitment to bring about change for future generations. And I am especially grateful to my thought partner and co-moderator, Cynthia Williams. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, the Clark Fox Policy Institute and the Brown School at Washington University in St. Louis. When COVID-19 forced schools to change how they facilitated learning, long-standing race and class divides in our education system became more distinct than ever. From food access to technology, from early education to higher education, students of color who are already facing great disadvantages, this really just reinforced the well-documented opportunity gap that we're already experiencing in our education system. We have an incredible panel here today. And so with the start of school just around the corner, we're so honored to welcome this set of educational and civic leaders to explore these topics with us. I would like to now hand it over to Cynthia Williams.
Thank you, Atia. Good morning to all. Good morning to our esteemed panel. And also to you, Atia, my good friend and thought partner. I am so eager to get into this discussion. So I am going to start with Sharonica and ask her to start the introductions give us your name, your title, your school organization affiliation, and lastly, a brief statement about how your current work is being shaped by COVID-19.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be on the panel. I want to thank the Clark Fox Policy Institute for this invitation, and definitely Atia and Cynthia, thank you. I want to acknowledge the amazing panel who are with us today. I'm Sharonica Hardin-Bartley. I have the pleasure of serving as the superintendent for the school district of University City. It is also a community where I live. I have been engaged in the work since I started in education almost 25 years ago. I feel that COVID has really revealed even more a lot of the systems of oppression and racism and separation that has plagued our country for many, many years. And I feel that COVID has really heightened my level of response to serving marginalized communities, particularly communities that reflect families and children that look like me. So Black, brown children, and also children that are coming to us from extreme poverty. It has also challenged my whole way of being. I feel that St. Louis has been siloed in its approach to serving our community, and we need more collaboration, more consistency. So it doesn't matter who is at the head of a system. It doesn't matter who's on the board of a school system. All children have access to quality education in meaningful ways. So I am for access for UC children, access for every child that lives in the St. Louis region.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Terry, would you please respond? Then we'll go to Sharita and then Art.
Yeah, thank you. I echo everything that Sharonica said. I'm Terry Harris, Executive Director for Student Services in the Rockwood School District. Thank you to the Institute. Thank you to you guys as organizers. I'm so happy to be on this call, on this panel. I would say, honestly, I've been doing this work for the last 15 years in my role. So COVID-19 is not surprising to me, right? So COVID-19 is not something that is an aha moment. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think for individuals who are surprised at the inequities or disparities that we see because of COVID-19, I'm just wanting to ask like, where were you? Right? I think what COVID-19 really revealed is the opportunity for individuals to turn away from all the issues because it didn't impact them. Their kids were going to school. Their kids had technology. So I don't have to see those things. I don't really want to take too much time because I know we have a lot to do, but I want to frame everything that I'm going to say today in the spirit of James Baldwin. So James Baldwin said, if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things that you do not see. And so I'm going to talk about some things that are probably hard for some individuals to hear, but it's not a shock to individuals who've been doing this work. I think COVID-19 has shown us that there are people who have a voice and people who don't have a voice. And those people who have been yelling and screaming, look at me, hear me, see me, we've turned a blind eye to those individuals. And now this is impacting the region. And now we're going back to all those individuals, right? We're going back to those people who were protesting in the streets. We're going back to those parents who were saying, you're treating my kids wrong. It's really interesting. There are many reports that came out forward through Ferguson and all these things that talked about the disparities and Black kids being suspended from school, and these parents are fighting for their Black babies to be in school. Like, that's what they were saying. We want our kids to be in school. And no one listened to those parents. And now you have a group of white parents who are going to board meetings or all across the country who are saying, our kids need to be in schools. What kids? Because there were a group of people who were saying that 10, 15 years before. So COVID-19 is not a shock to me. It's amazing. It's like this amazing movie where it's like, whoa, you didn't see that? They talked about that in the opening scene and you missed that? So everything I'm going to say is from a standpoint of love, because I love my city and I love my people. And I think we have to talk about these things.
Thank you. Sarita?
Good morning, everyone. I also echo everything that has been said and shared. Wow, let's jump in, right? I'm Sharonica Love. And I am the director of an organization here in St. Louis called Ed Hub STL. And situating myself in, how COVID-19 has impacted the way I move in this work. I think about how it has emphasized the urgently critical need for us to keep our kids at the center of each and every decision we make. Each and every decision we make impacts the literal life or death of our babies. And so it's just re-centered and re-emphasized that point for me. That centering the voices and experiences of those most impacted is how we must move. The importance of data, and not just data as in the numbers that we crunch, and data in the traditional ways that we think about how data tells us a story that is necessary for us to drive our decisions. But the data that lives and the data that is present in the lived experiences of those most impacted, those most marginalized by racism in our society. And those stories that are so critical and important that should be driving our decision. Like, we have to listen to people. I think to Terry's point, to Sharonica's point, and that's something that we haven't had to do, like as a structural system, we haven't had to listen to those most marginalized. And the yelling is so loud and the disparity is so loud, we have no choice but to listen. And so I think that has been my push and my refocus. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes.
I'll say it's a pleasure to be on this panel. It's a pleasure to be with everybody here. Thank you, Atia. Thank you, Cynthia. To my colleagues, to Dr. Hardin-Bartley, whom I love, great to see you. Dr. Harris, whom I love, great to see you. And to Sharonica Love, you are love, so we love you. I want to say a few things, and I don't want to preach to start, but I feel like it's almost required. And this is emotional, and we're starting off for advanced learners in this whole session. I don't think that we're started off like for novice. So when we say what we say, look it up, research it. asked for context, chatted, because we're just jumping in. First, let me start with, my role, because you asked. I'm the superintendent of Jennings, born and raised from here. I'm also an LLC and a 50C3 founder of SAGES, which Maxine Clark serves as one of my board members. Thank you, Maxine and Bob, for your support. I'm also on the Poverty Institute for Poverty and Geography, the IRB, for those who are scholarly and understand Wisconsin University, and the Institute for Research and Policy. I'm a fellow of that. None of that matters. All of that is an attempt to yell, to scream, that really I want to scream a few things. Welcome home is the first thing. Welcome home. Because for those of you that feel uncomfortable during COVID, I just want you to know that that's home for many of us. It's home for me. In Martin Luther King's words, we are creative veterans of suffering. That means that we have the scars, we have the badges, and welcome to the terrain that's called home, of being subject to random acts of violence, subject to no understanding of or security for where your means and provisions will come from, subject to Bloom's always came before Maslow always came before Bloom's, where Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological safety, so forth, is just essential. So wraparound services make sense. It makes perfect sense that Jennings has two school-based clinics, one ran by WashU, 2 homeless shelters, 2 food hubs with grocery stores every day, because that was essential before COVID. So welcome home. Before COVID, that looked genius. That looked like innovation. During COVID, that looks like barely enough. Welcome home. I will say that, my role during COVID, it changed only one small degree, and that is that it became more public of my state and national roles. I mean, being on the state COVID committee of the governor, the only one from the St. Louis area between here and Jefferson City, and the only one that's African American on that group. Margie Van Dieven being on that group, MSBA president being on that group. And that's unfortunate, and that's sad that I'm the only African American. There's only one female superintendent that happens to be on there. And so there's a lot of inequities we got to work through, but that's one role. But I've also been on the White House stakeholders leadership group, both for African Americans and for Latinos, for my work in California, on bi-weekly calls with Mike Pence, and Donald Trump has come on twice to the Latinos calls, but not once to the African Americans calls. So that gives me some insight to what's going on there. Bottom line is, Jennings School District is the only school that had in-person summer school in the St. Louis metropolitan region in a high COVID zip code. And we plan to have students in school on the 24th of August. That decision was not made lightly. There took a lot of work, preparation, and planning. Being the first district to have an approved plan, that helped. Being the first district to have about 45 contact tracers, myself being the first one certified by Johns Hopkins University, that helped. And other things helped. And doing it for a month with no transmission of COVID was reassuring. Having childhood services since April at the request of the Department of Education with no transmission of COVID is reassuring. Those are facts. Those aren't opinions, those aren't thoughts, those aren't hopes. And frankly, we're one of few, but I'll end by saying this. My children are just as good as MICDS, John Burroughs, Westminster, DeSmet, and those other schools that are open. And my children deserve the same that they deserve with those schools being open. They deserve educators who are capable and confident enough to do that. And if you're capable and confident, then you can do that. If you're not, then you should not, because this is a life or death situation. It's not to be entered upon lightly. So everybody has to make their own decisions. But my students deserve as much as MICDS, John Burroughs. And frankly, they may need more than MICDS and John Burroughs students. They may need adults more. And so for those most vulnerable groups that suffer neglect, suffer abuse, with abuse rates going up from mandated reporters who weren't seeing as many kids, and it's still going up, to court adjudicated, which is why we have homeless shelters, to the homeless, to others. We choose to be there for them. So 3 statements that educators have made for eons. We're lifelong learners. Okay, well, let's get some COVID certifications so that you can learn to save lives now, because we need educators for the sake of public good. Public servant leadership. People talk about it, write books about it. Now it's time to see what servants lead, because we're paid public servants on taxpayer dollars. And so now is the time to start measuring servant leadership. Lastly, people say education is a civil right. It's definitely a state statute, but if it's a civil right, I had a hard time taking away a civil right of my people. And so I wanted power to go to the people, and I gave them the right to deny that education in person by them having my faith that they were smart enough to choose to do the right thing. And thankfully they have. Even with us opening up schools, we have a great percentage of people who are doing virtual, and they're smart. And I thank my people for being smart enough to do that and confident enough. So those are my opening remarks. I look forward to this great discussion.
Thank you so much to all of you for being here and for those powerful opening remarks. I want to take us back just a little bit. So we're definitely talking about starting a new year and what that's going to look like for our children and their families. But I want to take us back to March, when the orders came down to when we were having to go to sheltering and schools had to close. And I want to ask you, and Dr. McCoy, you kind of touched on this. I want to talk about how the districts and how schools had to pivot and quickly evolve in response to the crisis. What were the most immediate ways in which you had to respond to the crisis? And, yeah. And we can start with anything. I'm kind of going to field that to Sharonica to start with, maybe, and think about, because Dr. McCoy, you just said it, there are vast inequities across this entire region, across the United States, in education systems and educational assets and resources. So definitely districts had to, all of us were faced with almost the same challenges, but not equally. I want you to talk about how schools quickly responded to the crisis when it first emerged.
So once we got over the shock of a closure, our immediate first efforts related to basic needs. We have tremendous food insecurity in our communities. And so we served food on March 25th. That's what we did first. We immediately worked to galvanize our partners, our faith-based organizations, other entities, and our staff volunteered to come out, and we distributed meals. To date, we're a small system, 2,600 children. We've served over 325,000 meals to our families. We have not missed 1 week of serving meals to support their basic needs. We also quickly began to think about the social emotional needs. We understand that something such as a COVID-19 pandemic has significant mental health implications. And so we began to work with our social services agencies so that we could provide teleconferencing and other resources and supports for our families. So it was about the need. Then we began to focus on the head. So our work began with our hearts. And we began with keeping our hearts at the center of what we do and understanding the tremendous amount of privilege that we have as educators who are able to care for our families. Then we went to the academics and began to put systems in place to engage children academically. We had many families that we were not able to connect with because there was little preparation for the closure. So I personally conducted 81 home visits, and I don't say that for any type of accolade. I say it because we have to go where they are. And even in the midst of this crisis, we needed to see what was happening with our families. And I needed to understand what they needed. No parent, none, very few, there are very few parents. Actually, I would argue that none of them really want something devastating to happen to their children. And so their lack of engagement was not because of their lack of love. It wasn't because they don't care. It wasn't because they don't take education seriously. They were dealing with life. They were dealing with just being, just existing in a community that honestly had not effectively served them well. So we had many essential workers that had to leave their children at home to go out and be able to pay bills, to keep lights on, to provide the basic necessities. So we showed up and demonstrated love, care, and kindness with our families without judgment and with a true sense of support. So that is where our brains immediately went to. We have an amazing team at U City. I think the work that we have done speaks to their commitment to doing what's best for all children. So, and we also understood, the last thing I'll say, we understood that there wasn't a one size fits all. And we could not just do one thing, one swoop to meet everybody's needs. Our parents' needs varied, our students' needs varied. And so we had to differentiate our supports in order to meet them where they are. And we continue to do that. And we continue to be mindful of our families and continue to give them that love and dignity. So getting food was a dignified experience. We celebrated, we had music, you know, it was happy. You know, parents, it's hard to come and drive through and pick up food for your kids and the humility that is there. So we had to humble ourselves. We had to practice humility and show up in a way that let them know that we were there for them and without judgment and really working to meet their needs as we navigated the unknown that turned into almost 164 days and 24 weeks since our children have been out of schools.
Yeah, I think, and I really appreciate you, Sharonica, having a kid in your district. So it was great leadership. I think just really quickly, for us, I remember I didn't have a Zoom account, but I did have Twitter. So I was tweeting some stuff and I text Sharita and I said, you know, we have to understand that there are kids who are in our districts but don't reside in our districts, right? So we have the voluntary transfer program, but we also have kids who are in schools under the McKinney-Vento Act, which says that if a kid is quote unquote homeless, they get to attend a certain school, which means that these kids are transient, right? So you may have a kid in University City, but that kid lives in Jenny's. That kid then Jenny's live in St. Louis Public, or that kid is in Rockwood. And so this whole notion of the African proverb of these are all of our children. Immediately when we closed schools, I remember texting Sharita and said, listen, we need to organize a regional call to make sure that all kids are eating. And so I didn't have a Zoom account. I didn't know, and Sharita and I are really good friends. And I said, you know, this was like, can I borrow some sugar moment? So I was like, you know, can I use your Zoom account? And she organized the Zoom account. We had 150 something people all around the region. And the whole concept was making sure that all the kids were going to eat. It's great that the kids in University City are eating because this wonderful superintendent organized that. It is wonderful that Dr. McCoy is doing that in Jenny's. But there are other schools, and Dr. Adams in St. Louis Public, but there are other school districts that didn't really have to think about that. Oh, you know, 99% of our kids are, you know, only 1% of our kids receive free and or reduced lunch. So that's not our issue, right? And so what I tried to do in that moment is organize us as a region to say, these kids are going to move all over, and no matter where they turn or where they go, they are going to be in need of food. And so, you know, Sharita and I organized that call, and it was very wonderful. That's just the first step that we did. We only talked about food in that moment. We weren't talking about the technology and the other things. So I don't know, Sharita, you want to jump in?
No, I'll just echo that, you know, you know, to your point, to Sharonica's point, you know, thinking about immediate needs was where, you know, I think all of our heads were when schools closed. We started to think about, you know, those things that are most essential to our kids and families. And for me, you know, I live in the place of organizing. So how do we organize? How do we mobilize? How do we strategize? So that as a region, as a community, we're engaged in this conversation, this work, so we can best support kids and families.
Sharita, while I have you on right now, I want to ask a question about, you know, Dr. Harris, you just pointed to, and Dr. Hardin-Bartley, you just pointed to just an incredible disparity when you say there's districts where maybe it's opposite, right? Maybe like there's a district where like 60 to 70% of the children are receiving free reduced lunch. And then we have districts where like maybe 20%, maybe less, maybe 10, maybe less. I want to ask you all about just why are there such, there's the pronunciation of disparities that came with COVID-19, but these disparities already existed, and what has contributed to such vast disparities in the public education system?
Right. I'm gonna go back on mute. Hold on. No. I'm yielding my time.
I'm gonna go to Art because I know he's gonna bring it. Our system is doing exactly what it is designed to do. Let's just be real. Yeah. We have these disparities because our systems are doing exactly what it is designed to do. So to change it, we have to disrupt that system completely and start over. And out.
Yeah, spot on. It was about 15 years ago that I had, and I'm gonna say this just to be kind of controversial. I had a Muslim head of education drive from Chicago to see me and had a conversation with me, reported directly to, to Farrakhan. And he said, Art, are you serious? Are you gonna be the head of these killing fields? And I'm not a Muslim. I'm not a Black Muslim, to make a distinction between the two. But these have been killing fields for our children. If the school system didn't kill you from your personal identity, if you were a person of color, by making you merge into an identity that was not your language, not your land, not your liberty, not your identity, then it would kill your integrity and your dignity as a human for resisting it. It will force you into submission, as seen by so many things, from the school to prison pipeline to just simply what you wear, how you dress, how you look at the teacher. You better smile at me. No, I don't have to smile at you. Killing fields. And so there have been soldiers like those on this panel who have been wrestling within those killing fields to make it a place that every child can be accepted. So kindergarten disparities, it's real. The disparity before kindergarten with the 2 million word gap, that's real. The fact that you can never catch up unless you have an extraordinary teacher for multiple years, that's real. The inequities that exist in society are real. And America is founded on such inequities where, simply put, Black labor matters more than Black lives. Latino labors matter more than Latino lives. DACA shows by the Supreme Court extending the decision of whether to have it or not, it shows how much the labor matters even more than the lives dying to just get here. And so that's part of who we are. And I emphasize that's part of who we are. We need to understand that it's in every system from housing, education, healthcare. We don't have healthcare in America. We have sick care in America, particularly during COVID, when you lay off nurses and doctors from doing the job during COVID. That's sick care, because you only want people who will deal with the sick from COVID that's about to die. These are inequities that's always been real, always been true. The question is, what are we doing about it? And I want to get to the question of what did I do when I learned about COVID. Let me first be very transparent and say that, first I'll say I was going to speak at Stanford in February, and that got canceled. And it, of course, occurred on the West Coast much sooner. So in February, I knew something weird was going on. Then on a Sunday, the 15th approximately, some superintendents were invited to the health department, Dr. Hardin being one, and I made it late, but at the same time, only 10 or so. So that shows the polarization, or at least the how things are done in Missouri, where there are certain people who have access and certain people who just won't even be invited to the meeting. After that meeting, I told all of my staff and students, prepare as if you're not coming back to this school or your school for the remainder of the 2020 year. So my people did what, we're a majority African-American population. When it's time to go under and not be seen, we were done. Classrooms were out. Teachers didn't have to come get nothing Because Dr. McCoy said on the telephone line to all 10,000 of our parents, and since 20,000 population here, and our students, 3,000, prepare as if we're not coming back at all. And so that was step one. Then step two, I'm gonna say, we gave everybody computers, we gave everybody hotspot access, we gave food, we had our grocery stores, so we gave over 2 million pounds of food. But being on the federal piece and knowing what was coming down and being written with the CARES Act, I saw a loophole where it said on the USDA, where it said that if you are a CEP school, that means your whole school gets free reduced lunch because of high number of TANFs and so forth, then your entire parent population can get SNAP. They can get pandemic food stamps. And I said, look at this, all these businesses getting money that have access to bankers. I'm on the bank board of commerce, but not many people that look like me per se. So I sent that out to my whole district and to everybody on Facebook. Here's your money. You can get $300 per kid, even if you don't qualify for free meals. And so I had parents who got $1,500, weren't on free meals because of reading the loopholes and knowing it and saying, let's invite you to the table to get some of this PPP that you don't have to return back. And so the other things that I did were something that's just common, I think, to most. And that is, I just started to try to be as transparent as possible. Yes, I gave out a lot of food and I was there, and like Dr. Hart said, none of that's for accolades. It just shows you who are your servant leaders, because in order to really lead your people, you must love your people. And that's what makes you do a home visit or give food and then care when you see who's getting food. And in order to serve your people, in order to save the people, you do have to do a certain amount of serving the people, because some people really need saving from some stuff that it takes a team to save them from. And so, it allowed me to shift even louder to be that type of leader. Always have been, lost jobs for being that, and been proud of it. Like I wear that as a badge of honor, like my veteran of creative suffering. Now I'm able to say, okay, before COVID, every 2 hours, one Black male expired from a homicide. Now, every 7 minutes, some person's dying, and it's more whites than Blacks by number, even though the percentage is greater for minorities, the number is greater for whites. But now every 7 minutes, a white is dying. Okay, now you care. Because before this, every 2 hours, more than one Black was expiring. But now that every 7 minutes, somebody in the world's dying, oh, now, welcome home. So now we're in a situation where every superintendent in St. Louis County has a choice. That choice is to do what's right by their people, but also to understand their role for public health, to educate, because this is a war against ignorance. It's a common enemy, and COVID is one of the biggest foes with ignorance, but it's always been a war against ignorance. And now you have a choice of how much to do in that war or not. But you've got to keep putting it in their faces, the disparities. And frankly, we can overcome it, but now COVID makes us overcome. We must overcome it and be better than yesterday if we're going to actually survive.
I agree, but I also think that the question is, like, how did we get here, which is a very famous sermon that Dr. Martin Luther King spoke. How did we get here, right? And I think we can look at the larger world and slavery and racism and all this stuff, or we can just go local, right? It wasn't a long time where St. Louis was this ideal city that was going to have millions of people, and it was, we're going to be amazing, and that didn't ever happen. And it wasn't long ago where white people who populated the city of St. Louis then moved out of the city to move to North County, right? And had laws and policies that forbid Black people from being there. And then when people went to court to fight against those things, then Black people then start to move to North County. White people left North County, then went to West County, then eventually went over across the river. It's what Toni Morrison, one of her last books, that she wrote, that's called The Origin of Others, right? The reason that we're here is because we have othered people. Like we don't want to be around certain people. We place value on those individuals. We saw that Shelley versus Kramer. You don't want a Black person living next to you because they're going to bring down the property value of your house if it's too many of those individuals, if it's too many of those individuals in your schools. We saw when a couple of years ago, when the kids from Normandy School District went to Melville and went across to whatever school district over across the river, right? St. Charles, or you guys know what I'm saying. When hundreds of people went to the board meetings to protest and said things like, you know, these kids are violent, they're crimes, these are the things that are going to happen. We other people. Why are we in this situation? Because we other people. And now what COVID has shown some people is that, you know, we need to work together. And people are willing to work together. I will give you all the money, all the food, all the technology that you want, so long as you stay over there. If we're not willing to, as educators, if we're not willing to deal with the fact that we are continuing to be complicit and othering, then we're gonna find ourselves here 5 years from now. And that's what we have to deal with. And the real question is, what makes us other people, right? And it's because of the history of America is really all about race. And we have to deal with that ugliness that is impacting our kids. So how do we get here? Why are we here? Because we're othering people, and we're going to continue to other people. And the plans that are coming out and the things that we're doing in schools is perpetuating that. And the question is, are we going to continue to be complicit in that? Or are we going to call all those things out? Are we going to organize, mobilize, and strategize like Sharita talks about to figure out how to prevent from school systems, housing systems, political systems from othering people? We don't need a wall to keep kids out of our school systems, be it Rockwood School District or University City or Jenny's or any of these other places.
May I jump in with a question? I want us to talk about student and impact on achievement. I mentioned this panel last night to my granddaughter and told her how excited I was about the discussion. And she asked me to share her concern about the impact of her achievement as a student based on COVID-19 adherence. So can you please address for us, what do you anticipate will be the impact on student achievement and what you feel must be in place to address that concern?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in, and just because I want to piggyback off of what Dr. Harris said for a second. So the notion of otherhood is very long lasting. And I just want to add one piece to it. Don't fall into the trap that is only about race, because race is a big part of it and it's been made as the major distinction in America, but it is beyond race. It gets to power. And even if race didn't exist, let's say we all became a mixture, there will still be power that makes me put someone below me or below you so I can stay above. And so many Black people of power put other Black people down underneath. I can't make any other better explanation for Clarence Thomas than that, and other people, because really the notion of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so know that we definitely need brotherhood and sisterhood to beat every otherhood that deals with power. And this is a power analysis. So when it comes to student achievement, that's a really great question, Ms. Williams. Cynthia, your grandchild hit it on the head. I've been wrestling with this as a futurist for a while, for a long time, but especially now. So here's number one. We all know that there's gaps in learning. We know that there's learning loss from no summer learning that could be 1 year to 2 years to 3 years, so that people have lost that when you have districts, and I can name them, that did no virtual learning, did packets, and didn't know how to do it well and didn't do it well. That's real. Then you have the issue of some people don't learn well virtually, and therefore there's slippage. There's not as much understanding, because body language makes up 70% of communication, words make up 10 to 15%. And therefore, all we see now is the 10 to 15%, except for people who can view our body and see the shifting and say and make assumptions, but it's not the same as being really in close proximity. So that's a loss. There's major losses of learning, but I want to argue this. everything that we knew about 21st century essential skills before COVID is BC. I separate everything into BC, AC, and DC. BC is before COVID, like before crisis, prehistoric. AC is after COVID. That's 2 years from now, 22-23 school year, where a vaccine has been created, tested, free or cheap enough for everybody to access, and trusted enough for people like me who remember Tuskegee will still say, okay, I'll give this a try. But no, I don't want syphilis. I don't want anything in my body that I don't trust. Created, tested, free, trusted. That's going to take 2 years, 2023. So AC is a while from now. And then herd immunity is a while from now. So now DC, during COVID. During COVID, it's an essential learning skill that people know how to learn remotely. Because the fact that 4 out of 5 Blacks cannot work remotely, 5 out of 6 Latinos cannot, is a power issue. But if you are part of that 20% of Blacks that can, if you're part of that, then you have power. And so how do I equip my kids to have the power to be privileged, even if you don't learn as well with it now? Because I want my Black children to have the same thing that an MICDS or any wealthy kid in privilege can have. I have to make that an essential 21st century skill of problem solving, of the 3 C's, connectivity, computer literacy, and life coaching. Not just COVID life coaching, but life coaching. And that part is more important than the computer. You need the coach who knows, the life coach. And so I argue that for introverts, this screen evens the playing field, because if you were an extrovert in school, kind of like I was a little bit, then being in person is like you're running it. But if you're an introvert, this screen helps you to now run it, because it's like you have an even playing field. Psychologically speaking, there's a barrier that allows you to be more bold and courageous. You may hear more from females. You may hear more from anyone of any minority disposition. And so we as educators, now I'm speaking as a PhD. So I got the PhD to create knowledge, to determine what counts as knowledge. And we're talking to WashU, so that's appropriate now. So what I'm sharing is that we as educators have to be equitable in our creation of what counts as knowledge and how we validate that knowledge so that you can flip the inequities, even in DC during COVID. That's going to take some real leadership work, forward thinking, and less herds mentality. We can't watch TV as much. We have to do the research, the studying, and the proving, and the testing, and the piloting, the lab schooling, and the innovations to make that sure. And so that's part of why we're doing this as well. It's not for accolades, but we believe we're an incubator for new things that counts as knowledge. We were the first, and with U City, to have internet or to have national virtual learning internships paid for by Lenovo, KPMG, in the heart of COVID, with beautiful Black and brown children learning, getting paid, and a new essential skill like what we're doing. That's essential to what we have to do, and so much more. To answer the questions your granddaughter asked, that's the work that we have to do, and we're doing it.
I will just add just a little bit to your question, Cynthia. For me, it is it's very basic. Children learn from people that they believe care for and love them. Rita Pearson has an amazing TED Talk about every child needing a champion. And I think now, as we think about the gaps with children, particularly children of color, the relationship piece matters. Children don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. That's cliche, it's old, but it's real. So we have to build the relationships and make the connections first. Then the learning can happen. And we try too much to force and push the academics and don't value how important relationships are. Now more than ever, when you're talking with children via Zoom, you don't have the connection. The social emotional learning and work that we must do for children is even more critical. So I would say that the opportunity gap, because it's really not about our children's ability to achieve, their brains are just fine. And they're very creative and they're very smart. We just have to tweak and work with them a little differently. But we have to lean into that heart work. It's not about our accolades. It's not about who we are and what education that we have. They could care less about that. They want to know that you care about them in authentic ways and that you care about their well-being. And you have to be able to make those connections. When children love their teachers, you'll be amazed at the effort that they put forward. You'll be amazed at how they can't wait to get on that Zoom call. I was on another call that actually Sharita and Terry facilitated, and they were talking about parents don't even want their kids to be involved in some of our schools, virtually or in person, because their experiences pre-COVID were so horrible, because they didn't have a sense of belonging, they didn't feel loved, they didn't feel valued, they did not feel that they were being seen. And if we don't see our children and look at them as if they are truly our own and ask that question, is this good enough for mine? If it's not good enough for the child that I birthed, it's certainly not good enough for the children that I serve. So it is about love, it is about heart, and it is about those relationships first. Then educators that are on the call, you can get to the academics, but build those relationships first, particularly in a pandemic. Care about their well-being, allow them to be afraid, be vulnerable for them. Let them know that you are afraid too. Let them know that you are human. See them as human beings with a tremendous amount of potential and be amazed at what they'll produce.
Woo! I'm just gonna say it. We got to take a deep breath right there.
We should take a deep breath.
We should take a deep breath right there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add this one quick piece though to just 30 seconds, right? I think the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is learning? So Dr. McCoy, when you talk about power, like I want to talk about power as well, but maybe differently, right? I think that school systems are these places where it's like, we have all the power, so we control everything. What is learning? I would argue that kids are learning during this COVID-19 situation. They're learning how to care for people. They're learning how to, you know, if you're getting food on Monday and that food needs to last until Friday, they're learning math, right? Dr. Patina Love wrote an amazing article called Spirit Murderers, and the second article was called, when schools produce trauma, when schools are the places where kids experience trauma. Like, I'm not saying that's the case for all kids, but this notion of regular school pre-COVID that worked for everyone is not real. Malcolm Gladwell and his book Outliers, this is a part that I think about a lot when we think about learning. And Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, he said he gave a brick, just a regular brick, to the most prestigious school in England, like this very gifted school. And he gave them a timer, like 1 minute. You got to write down all the things that you can do with this brick. And they came up with maybe 20, 30, 40 things, right? He then went to the most hood place that you can probably think of, or, that people would think of in Chicago, right? That people think about these kids in a certain way. And he gave them that same brick, and he gave them the same 1 minute. And he said that the kids were still thinking about things that they can do with the brick, even when time was called, right? What is learning? Like, I think we want to have power and control about, like, this is learning. I think everyone is saying, like, oh, these kids are going to lose so much academic. No, if you have this mindset of what did you lose this summer, then yes, right? If schools, leaders, and teachers frame the conversation when kids come back to school, how are you doing, to Sharonica's point? Are you okay? What do you need? And what are all the things that you learned this summer, right? And they can tell you, I learned this, and they can also tell you the barriers that they had. Let's frame the question differently. Let's understand that these parents that we disrespected, the parents that we did not see, the parents that we said didn't care about their kids' education, now these parents are the same parents who are educating their kids, and they probably did it better than what you did for the last 3 years, right? How are we framing the question? Yeah. That's what I would ask. Sharita, jump in there.
I got nothing to say on top of this.
I do have a question for Sharita, though. I want to ask you, Sharita, you're keeping an eye on like the 30,000 foot conversation, right? Not at the school level or the district level, but you're looking at this from like regional level and higher. I want to ask, I see it's already shifting, but the pandemic, the rise in the rise in attention to anti-Black racism around the world, but particularly in this country, and more eyes on the opportunity gap and the wealth gap in this nation. How is that changing our conversation around racial justice in education?
Yeah, it's for me, it feels like a moment where it's changing it, in a hopeful movement where this will be a sustained change in the ways that we approach this conversation around anti-Black racism and the racism that is so pervasive in the education system. Now, I do see, from where I sit, having the ability to move within different district conversations, DESE conversations around, certain laws and policies that are impacting what's happening around the pandemic in the future. And so I do see where there are coalitions attempting this work. Like, there's parents that are, raising their voice. There are educators who, aren't taking a stance of like, oh, well, I just teach. No, I have power. I have the ability to act. And so how do I move within this conversation and raise my voice to say, hey, this is actually what matters here. Listen to me. And so I do definitely see the coalitions that are being formed in a different way. I think the regional approach here in St. Louis is different. It feels and looks different. And I've been engaging in these conversations for years and years and years. And so my hope is that it is sustained work and sustained focus. I'm going to go back to your words that you posed, Atia. The sustained focus and understanding around anti-Black racism. And, and even just this may seem like it's a side conversation, but I think this is also important to what you're posing here. When we focus on Blackness and understand the historical implication of what it means to be Black in this country, and how our systems, the laws, the policies, how we have moved in this country that have so been codified in our systems that impact Blackness. When we understand that a focus on that is necessary to lift everyone, like when we focus on Black folk and we fix the ills that have plagued Black folks in this country, and that includes education, to Dr. McCoy, healthcare, all of the things, that's going to lift us all. So it's not about othering. Oh, what about this group? What about that group? What about when you lift Black folks, you're going to see a shift for us all. So, and that is my hope at the core of this, that we continue that focus, not just in statements that we're putting around Black Lives Mattering, not just in our hiring diversity, equity, and inclusion folk to work in our school districts. But what is this sustained regional coalition that is organizing? I'm going to keep saying it, that is strategizing, that is mobilizing for the benefit of our babies, because this is literal life or death for them. Literal.
I love what you said. And I want to also add to that and just say, for me, it's not about lifting Black folks, it's lifting the oppressive burdens that have been put on us for centuries.
You can come on and preach.
You're not lifting me up. Nobody's lifting me up. I'm asking you to take your knee off my neck.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what Baldwin said. He said it's something in an article. He was like, I'm not asking you for anything. I just really want you to leave me alone so I can do what I do. Right?
Yeah. I have a hard time quoting other people in times like this, because these times demand us. And I look forward to the day when people are going to be quoting Dr. Terry Harris and said, Dr. Harris said this, and really, because this is a unique challenge that we have today that requires a unique level of leadership. There's a few points that I want to underscore just so that people know. One is this: care and concern is important, and the cliches have some truth in it. No one cares what you know until they know you care. So I want people to know that it's important to understand what that looks like. Like Terry Harris said, what does learning look like? And so I want to use this line. It's one that everybody should know. No greater love that a person have than this, that they lay down their life for a friend. and I made it both genders. The sacred text says that a man has this, but it's man or woman. And so when you have teachers who, in my district, have not protested, but they've actually said, we want to lay down our lives to have our kids who need us come to learn. It doesn't matter how many nice words someone says to make you feel the passion. My warriors are laying down their lives, and there is no greater care than anyone can say or do or have than to give up your life for those who need. So that's number one. That's number one. So you do have to dig into what this really means. Secondly, this is a policy institute. So I have to say, there is no policy that will make you care about me. There's no policy that anybody can write that will make you love me. There is no policy that will make you leave me alone so that I can do what I want to do. There are policies that can make it illegal to do certain things, but no policy can bring compassion. So now, then, how do we live? When there are some people, I tell people, I give you the right to hate me and know that I'm gonna be bad with you hating me. I don't need your love in order to have liberty and to exist. But what you do have to have is power, and power comes through policy. Power comes through advocacy. Also, when I marched 14 times, and to the organizers, when they chant, "This is what democracy looks like," I make sure that they know that this is what the amendment of freedom of speech looks like. But then true democracy then gets the attention of people in power to then say, let's sit down and give you a little bit more of what you want. And unfortunately, it looks like Seattle, where they gave the whole police department to a group, and then the police chief, who's the first Black female, resigns and says, it's time for me to go. But that's kind of what democracy looks like. It's the whole continuum. This is a policy institute. So what does it look like? It looks like we have the largest movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, in the history of movements in America. It beat the civil rights movement. Set off of the context of people being told to stay home to lengthen your life, you reduce your liberties. And many people have done that wisely. And then while doing that, we saw a knee on someone's neck, and some people, millions, said, I'm gonna be willing to lose my life to lengthen our liberty. And that's what care looks like, losing your life. Now, you add to that, that's not for everybody. So then you have Cori Bush, who becomes the first female in that office, which is amazing. God forbid if we allow us to not do the census. We got 50% of the census being taken in some places, and her very seat is going to be ripped from her, and she won't be there more than 2 years because somebody didn't fill out the census. Come on now, let's be real. I don't want any more snaps or claps for anything. This is just straight truth. We won a Cori Bush seat, and now we're going to lose it because we didn't fill out a census. The snap didn't help. Get online and do your census. If you want less COVID, somebody's gonna have to be willing to lose their life to save people's lives. I'm a Black man. These are Black women here. When somebody sent on the chat some very important words that it started way before in 1847, because when you chose to read as a Black person, you got hung. I often bring a dictionary to my classrooms of kindergarten, first and second grade, and I said, you know what, you used to get hung for actually reading this. But we read it anyway, because that's what compassion looks like, losing your life being the greatest method. Now, I'm not saying out there to go kill yourself, but I do know that suicide is the second leading cause of death among 10 to 34 years olds, because they don't feel the love and they don't see the love, and no policy can force someone to love, and there's a lack of attention. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, from a policy vantage point, how do you move forward to make sure that your kids get people who are willing to sacrifice their life to put students first? I find it very, very challenging and distressful that when the world needs education now to fight the war against ignorance, and now including COVID, that too many of us who could do something in person has not put forth the effort to do what it takes to do more for those kids who need it in person. That's challenging. And the last thing I want is for somebody who doesn't know as much as me in education. So like a governor who's a sheriff to tell educators what to do. That's the last thing we need. We need educators to tell education what to do. But ultimately, power will be written by people, policy will be written by people in power. And so we have to keep the passion, but you have to make sure you meet the passion with power, because you can't force anybody to care about you. You have to love yourself and care about yourself enough to do it.
I know time is almost over, but
right. I want you to say something, Dr. Harris. I just want to say thank you for, I know a couple people have to drop off. Please, if you can stay, we still have 220 people here. Stay with us for a few more minutes. But I just want to thank those of you who are with us for this hour. Stay tuned. This is being recorded. You will be able to see it later if you don't get to stay. Go ahead, Dr. Harris.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say a couple of things. One, yes, please fill out your census, right? I want people to fill out the census. But I know, you know, this is probably the point where we as a panelist start to push back, right? Have our different points of views. And I just want to say that, you know, I do want people to fill out their census. But I also don't want to shame folks for not doing it because they are focusing on trying to survive. Right. So like there are barriers and there are things that are happening where people are just, you know, lost in their space. In terms of opening up schools, I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that COVID-19 has hit the Black and brown community hard. And the reality is we don't have this great relationship with the medical field as Black people. Read medical apartheid. You know, how about this, the wonderful For the Sake of All report that was created by Jason Purnell at WashU that talked about the inequities that exist right here in our city, right? And so when you have Black people who are living in intergenerational homes, and when you have people who have compromised immune systems, and then you're listening to these experts and they're telling you that if you get caught with this, then potentially your great grandmother who's living with you can die. Like, that's real. Again, I think I would say, Dr. McCoy, that, you know, what is learning and what is education, and what can that look like? I don't think that education has to look like those kids have to go into the buildings of Jenny's. And if individuals are not allowing Black kids to go into the buildings, then there is a lack of care for those Black kids. I really want to push back on that. And I really want to say that we can recreate this system and structure the way that we need to, that's going to work for our community. The second piece is, you know, when those young people are saying democracy, and then we say, like, all of these things are steeped in how the system was framed. And so you know, you mentioned you want people to, quote Terry, right? One day, right? Here is something that hopefully people will say, or that can quote. When individuals are talking about dismantling systems, I want you to also think about what is a system that you're going to create? What is the system that you're going to mantle? So we focus so much on dismantling that we're not really thinking about, like, what is that beloved community? And I'm saying that in this space of, this is our 9/11 moment in education. September 10th, 2001, you could walk your mom, your daughter, your dog, anyone to the airplane. You can probably walk them to their seats and give them a kiss on the plane. September 11th happened, September 12th came, and we couldn't do that. People were upset. You couldn't take toothpaste in the line. You had to wait in line for a long period of time. And people were angry. Now, it's just, it is what it is. It's part of our lives, right? This is our moment in education where we can truly reimagine education. Learning does not have to happen in those four walls. Learning is happening constantly. We can engage kids. We can meet in parks. We can bring some kids to the school. We can expand the school day, right? And so I don't think that it's individuals who are saying that, you know, that the kids who are needed the most, we're turning our backs on those kids. I don't think that. And I think that if anyone is doing that, I mean, we need to challenge them. But I think that we need to challenge the system and thinking that we have to bring kids into a building where, you know, there's really not a lot of space. Jenny's can't compare themselves to John Burroughs. John Burroughs has 1 million acres where kids can be everywhere, right?
I'll reply now once you finish the sentence. Right? If you go and finish your sentence.
You can jump in there. I think it's for all of us to think about. I don't want to necessarily tell Terry.
Let me share this. Having spoken John Burroughs and having to speak at John Burroughs and in my CDS again to help teach their children at the request of their staff, I can say that there's a few responses. First, I'll restate that for those kids who need us most, for instance, like the 50 that I house and have a homeless shelter for, so they're in a house that Jennings built. And of course, they're going to keep getting educated. There are kids that need us. And if we aren't there, we are in neglect. By definition, if their parent is not there, then by loco parentis, which is our legal responsibility, which means in place of parent, if that child is not able to stay by themselves, 5 years old, 6 years old, homeless, we are in neglect by legal statute. So we're talking about policy. So you can research the policy. That's number one. Number two, if it's good enough and the staff are capable enough and confident, like Johnsboro's, my staff are just as good and capable and competent enough, and my kids may need it more. So those two statements stand by themselves. This is not something that we're planning. This is something we've already done. I'm speaking in facts. Now, by no means are we asking for all kids to come to school. Attendance is not required. I was on the governor's board and made the recommendation to make it not required. On the same day, I made the recommendation that we close all schools in the state of Missouri, which is April the 9th, that all schools did close, and the governor followed suit on that. The request is not that all kids attend school. The request is that students and staff be there for one another because we care for those who would be in neglect, a legal situation to not be there. Because frankly, we know that 80% of Black parents work, and I got a 98% Black population. They're the quote unquote essential workers. And the question is, essential to who? Essential to our capitalistic society. That's what they're essential to. Mm-hmm. Therefore, we policy-wise have to be essential workers as educators, because what we know is 27% of nurses are those essential workers that need childcare. And if, as a school system, being on the board of BJC, I know this, and others should know it, that if those nurses don't have childcare, then they can't help you even if you have COVID, because they have to quit their job because the policies and procedures again. So this is a complex analysis that you have to figure out what your role is and do what you can do. As the CEO of my school system, I have the charge and the responsibilities of the lives on my hand of my students and staff and others, but I let them know that they are responsible for their lives too. So get educated. That's why we have contact tracers. So we're not dealing with what we heard. We know what we know. And then we are able to help the health department trace every person. We know the rules. We know the requirements for mitigation. And we ultimately know that we're going to do our best to keep kids safe. We know that we know a little bit more than our parents do when we're certified contact tracers as well. And so we can begin to educate people, not on myths, but not on fear, but facts. And so we will face everything and rise. That's how we reframe fears. And so we're going to continue to do this. This is an opinion. If you want to see what it looks like, just like it was on Channel 5, Channel 4, Channel 2, CNN, come visit us because we're here. I can send you the clips, Dr. Harris, for you to see what it looked like. But ultimately, this isn't the only way. Every place has to find their way, because all of us are going to be piloting what education looks like, because we have no choice now to reinvent it. It must be reinvented. That's the issue. The question is, when will people start to reinvent it? And we need to do something for everybody. Right. It's not a one size fits all. The enemy is COVID.
And Sharonica, I think and we still have 190 people on the call. So Sharonica, I want you to go ahead and jump in because I know you have something to say.
I was just trying to close us out.
All right. Well, we knew this would be a conversation that would be hard to end because we needed more than 60 minutes, and because this is weighing so heavily on our hearts, on our heads. There are policy implications, but there are human life implications every day for this. The balancing what children need and what families need with all their needs. I don't want it to enter this conversation with a scarcity mindset that somehow there's a small group of resources that we somehow only some lives are valuable and we can only put a little bit towards education and a little bit towards that. We have the means in this country and in this region. We have the abundance, we have the means, we have the resources that, to be honest, and we have the wherewithal and the imagination, as Dr. Harris mentioned, we have some of the modeling, as Dr. McCoy mentioned, of how to approach these things, of how to think differently, of how to value all lives, of how to center children and families. We do have higher rates of hospitalization for Black and brown children contracting the virus. but there is not a scarcity of resources here. So we have to get away from that framework that somehow only a little bit of here and a little, and somehow that the only option is children's health and life or their education, learning, and growth. There is a space for all of this. And I know every panel, all our speakers here today, they're living this reality. They're creating those new spaces. They're challenging their staff, their students. We want to thank them for that. Public people are having to leave, but I'm going to give us 3 more minutes, and I'm going to say everybody gets to wrap up with 1 sentence. You're going to have to keep it to about probably 45 seconds. I'm going to have, whoever wants to start, give us your lasting line. Give us that message of hope or resilience or energy or charge that you want to leave us with. And so this is lightning round.
Let's let Sharita start.
That's right. Let's start with Sharita. Lightning round. Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to start with me? That's so hard. That's so hard. The first thing that popped into my mind, or the first person, was Philip Agnew. I shared a video with him. He is, I hope I don't get this wrong. He is an organizer and activist, poet, with Dream Defenders and the movement for Black Lives. And I was on a call with them a couple months back, and he just gave this just powerfully moving rendition of a poem that it resonates so deeply. I can't listen to it without getting emotional, but then also wanting to go out into the streets and like save the world. But he just calls us in. He gives us this, I'll share it if I can, because it's so powerful. I'll share it with you, Atia. But he gives us, like, he sets us up in this place of like, being angry, being frustrated, but then being called to love, like remembering love in this moment. And then he reminds us of the organizing movements of the past that we've been involved in. And he calls us to remember who we are in those moments. That are we not the children born of uprisings? Is this not our time? Like, have we not been doing this? And then he calls people on the call by name, people in organizations by name, and just calls us to remember that, to remember. So, Dr. McCoy, Dr. Sharonica, Dr. Terry Harris, Atia, Cynthia, Janet, and the 183 people that are left on this call today, just calling us to remember, like, that we are the ones that we've been waiting for. And so it's up to us, in whatever sphere of influence we have, in whatever space, my heart set mindset that we're in, to join this movement and continue this movement and remember who we are. Like, this is what we've been doing throughout history, and we'll continue to do it.
Dr. Hardin-Bartley.
So just thank you for the opportunity. I want to end in my 45 seconds with saying that this is an all of us issue. This is an all of us issue. And we don't have to separate or say who's more important or who's doing it better. We have regional systemic issues in St. Louis that have been in place for many, many years. And in order to change that for my daughter, for your children, for our children, we have to do things differently. And I believe that collaboration is the way that we accomplish these things. Atia, you're absolutely right. We have everything we need. I mean, we have an abundance of resources. We have an abundance of philanthropic efforts, but we're all competing for those same resources instead of coming together to galvanize our resources. I think the educational system is completely disrupted. We have so many school districts with so many superintendents, so many boards of education. So that's an issue. We did call that out in the Ferguson report. We're based on property value, which sets up the inequity. So as I stated before, our system is doing what it's designed to do. So we have to change those systems and really break down the Jennings, the UCD, the St. Louis Public, the Normandys, the Ritters. We serve the same kids. And we have similar issues. They're not exactly the same, but they're similar. So we're all in this together. This is an all of us issue. And if we truly want to change or reimagine, we've been reimagining what we do in UCD since I started 5 years ago. We want to reimagine what we're doing. Let's start with how we go about our business and eliminate the silos and truly work for the well-being of all of our children. And I will say that yes, Black and brown children and poor children are the group that has been marginalized the most. So let's just call it what it is. We have a racial issue in our state. We have a racial issue in St. Louis, and we have to be comfortable saying that, no matter what group, what setting, or who our audience is. So we're all in this together.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, and then last but not least, Dr. McCoy.
Yeah, I think that my 40 seconds is just a remembering that this whole thing is a love story, right? It's just a love story. And at the end, the kids win, the teachers win, right? It's a love story. And the question is, what character do you want to play in this story? Are you the person that is creating the barriers to have these kids win and receive the love? Are you the person that is the lady on the way that's, you know, helping out? Are you the person setting up the date? Are you like the kids win? And so at the reimagining of schools must be dreamed of as a love story, because people feel good in love stories. My wife watches Love and Basketball every day. So, you know, we have to reimagine Black kids and their characters as individuals worthy of love and going to win and receive all the love and are cared for in this very beloved community. I also would say that for me, the drive is, I tell people all the time that I'm from St. Louis and I'm so St. Louis. And so when people are from St. Louis, they know what so St. Louis is. And for people who are not from St. Louis, so St. Louis simply means I love my city.
That's
and
it.
when you love your city, it goes back to what Baldwin said. I have to make you conscious of the things you do not see. And that's love.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy.
I want to say that we need leaders. And in order for us to get into an AC after COVID, it's going to take every one of us to lead how we've been sent here and called to lead. It may not be what everybody agrees with, but we don't need agreement. We need leadership, and everybody is a leader. So you all have a role to play. So let's get to doing it. It's time to act and not clap, because we have to lead as if our life depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you. Thank you so much for answering my granddaughter's question. She is in the chat. I also want you to know that I thank God for my frame of reference, for the leaders that you are, and that you are part of our community. I am so grateful to have all of you. So I'll turn it back over to you, to Atia, to take us home.
I'm so grateful that you left us with leadership and love. And we are going to sign off on that note, because I don't think there's anything more powerful in this moment than your leadership being one of the highest acts of love that our region can accept. So much gratitude. Several people asked us to continue this conversation. I just want to alert our panelists to not be surprised when we ask you back. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. We're going to sign off for today. Please stay tuned. Thank you so much. With love.
You.
With love.